Have you ever been driving late at night, down a long, dark stretch of highway, and felt that little prickle on the back of your neck? That feeling that you're not entirely alone, even though the road ahead is empty. Most of the time, it's just our imagination playing tricks on us, our minds filling in the blanks of the darkness. But sometimes, it's not. Tonight, I want to share a story that comes from a long-haul truck driver named Mark. He's been driving the interstate for over 20 years, seen it all, or so he thought. This happened about a decade ago, on a desolate section of I-80, cutting through the Nevada desert. It's a route he knew like the back of his hand. A stretch of road, so straight and flat you could fall asleep and wake up in the same lane. But on this particular night, something was different. It was around 2 in the morning. The sky was starless, a thick blanket of clouds swallowing the moonlight, making the darkness outside his cabin feel absolute. The only light was from his headlights, carving a narrow tunnel through the pitch black. His radio was crackling with static, so he'd turned it off hours ago, leaving only the steady drone of his engine and the rhythm of the tires on the pavement. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, on the shoulder of the road, was the faint, flickering light of a hazard signal. As he got closer, he could make out the shape of an old sedan, something from the 70s or 80s, sitting completely dark except for that one blinking light. It looked out of place, a relic from another time abandoned in the middle of nowhere. Mark was a cautious guy. The highway can be a dangerous place, and you hear stories, but he also lived by the trucker's code. You don't leave someone stranded, especially not out here. So he slowed his rig, the air brakes hissing as he pulled over about 100 feet ahead of the car. He grabbed his heavy maglite flashlight, put on his jacket, and stepped out into the cold desert air. The silence was the first thing that hit him. The moment his engine idled down, it was like the world went completely quiet. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Just the lonely blink of that hazard light. Flash. 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 He started walking back towards the car, the crunch of his boots on the gravel sounding unnaturally loud. Hello. It cut it out, his voice seeming to get swallowed by the immense darkness. Anyone need a hand? No answer. He got closer. The car was a mess. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if it had been sitting there for weeks, not hours. The tires were flat and cracked. One of the windows was shattered, glass littering the ground. But that single taillight kept on blinking, steady as a heartbeat. He peered through the driver's side window, shining his flashlight inside. The interior was stripped. The seats were torn, springs poking through the upholstery. There was no radio, no steering wheel cover, just bare metal and ripped fabric. It was a ghost of a car. A shell? There was no way anyone had driven it here tonight. There was no way it could even run. And yet, the light blinked. A cold chill much colder than the desert night ran down Mark's spine. This was wrong. All wrong. He swept his flashlight beam across the front seat. D-bike Seat, empty. He walked around to the passenger side, shining his light through the broken window. And that's when he saw it. Sitting on the dusty, ripped passenger seat was a small, worn-out teddy bear. It was old, one of its button eyes missing. It was just sitting there, propped up perfectly, as if a child had just set it down. That's what really got to him. The car was a wreck, clearly abandoned for years. But the teddy bear, it looked like it was waiting for someone. Suddenly, the blinking stopped. The hazard light went out, plunging the side of the road back into complete darkness. Mark was frozen for a second, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence was now deafening. He backed away slowly from the car, his flashlight beam darting around nervously into the desert. He kept expecting to see someone standing there, watching him. He got back to his truck, never taking his eyes off the dark shape of the sedan. He didn't run, but every instinct was screaming at him to get out of there. He climbed into his cab, locked the door, and fired up the engine. He didn't even look in his mirrors as he pulled back onto the highway. Flooring it, he drove for a solid hour, the adrenaline coursing through him, before he dared to even glance at his CB radio. He fumbled with the knob, turning E-tone, desperate to hear another human voice. The radio crackled to life, and a voice came through, another trucker somewhere up the road. Mark, his voice shaky, keyed the mic. Hey driver, you on I-80 eastbound, past the salt flats. The voice came back, "Yeah, that's a big 10-4. What's up?" Mark hesitated, then said, Did you happen to see an old sedan on the shoulder back there? Broken down." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, low and serious. "The one with the teddy bear." Mark's blood ran cold. "You saw it too. Ask it? Son," the voice on the radio said. "People have been seeing that car for 30 years. Story goes, a family crashed out there a long time ago. A little girl died in the accident. They say she's still out there, waiting for her parents to come back for her and her bear." Mark didn't say another word. He just kept driving, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. He drove straight through to his destination, not stopping until the sun was high in the sky. He never drove that stretch of I-80 at night again. Now, you can dismiss this as just another ghost story. A trucker's tall tale told over a greasy diner coffee. Maybe Mark's tired mind was playing tricks on him. But how do you explain the other trucker? How do you explain a car, abandoned for decades, with a single light that blinks for help? A light that only seems to blink for certain people at a certain time of night. The highways that connect us are full of stories. Most are about the journey, the destination. But some are about the things we see along the way. Things that can't be explained, that linger in the dark spaces between the mile markers. The next time you on a lonely road late at night and you see a strange light, maybe you'll think twice. Maybe you'll remember Mark's story and just keep on driving. Thanks for listening tonight. If you have your own unexplained story from the road, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. See you next time, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the world of long-haul trucking. A job that's filled with endless highways, strange diners, and sometimes things that just can't be explained. We've all heard stories about phantom hitchhikers or weird lights in the sky, but this one is a little different. It comes from a veteran trucker named Ray, and it's a story he swears is true. He calls it the delivery route that ends in nowhere. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday night, and Ray was on a cross-country haul, pushing to make a deadline. His dispatcher called with an unusual last-minute addition to his route. It was a pickup from a small, unnamed distribution center, supposedly just a few miles off the main interstate in rural Ohio. The pay was exceptionally good for such a short detour, so Ray, despite feeling a bit uneasy, accepted the job. He plugged the address into his GPS, and it guided him off the familiar highway and onto a series of increasingly narrow country roads. The rain was coming down harder now, and the asphalt soon gave way to a muddy gravel track. His GPS kept insisting he was on the right path, but the road was barely wide enough for his rig. The trees on either side seemed to close in, their branches scraping against the top of his trailer like bony fingers. There were no houses, no streetlights, just darkness and the rhythmic thumping of his windshield wipers. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes, his GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." But there was nothing there, just a dead-end road swallowed by a dense, dark forest. No warehouse, no lights, no sign of human life. Ray tried to call his dispatcher, but there was no signal. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He put the truck in reverse, planning to slowly back his way out of there when he saw Italiano, a single, flickering light, deep in the woods, just off the road. It looked like an old-fashioned lantern. Against his better judgment, curiosity got the best of him. He grabbed his heavy flashlight and stepped out into the chilling rain. As he walked toward the light, the air grew heavy and cold. The sounds of the highway, which should have been audible, were gone. All he could hear was the rain and the squelch of his boots in the mud. He pushed through some thick brush and found himself in a small, unnerving clearing. In the center was an old, dilapidated wooden sign, barely standing. Using his flashlight, he wiped away the moss and grime to read the faded letters. It wasn't a company name. It was a list of names and dates, like a forgotten memorial. That's when he heard it, a soft whisper, carried on the wind, that seemed to come from all around him. It was too faint to make out the words, but it sounded like a warning. Pure, instinctual fear washed over Ray. He didn't wait for a second invitation. He sprinted back to his truck, not even daring to look behind him, jumped into the cab, and slammed the gears, scraping and groaning as he maneuvered the massive rig back the way he came. He didn't stop until he was back on the brightly lit interstate, his heart pounding against his ribs. When he finally got a signal, he called his dispatcher, ready to chew him out. But the dispatcher was completely confused. He said he never called Ray with an extra stop. There was no record of it, no mysterious distribution center, and definitely no high-paying bonus. According to their system, Ray had been on his scheduled route the entire time. To this day, Ray has no idea where he went that night or what that dead-end road was. But he never takes an unscheduled detour again, no matter how good the money sounds. Thanks for watching, everyone. What do you think happened to Ray? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spooky tales from the road. Stay safe out there. The open road. It's a trucker's life. Miles and miles of asphalt, the hum of the engine, the world blurring by. It can be lonely, sure, but it's also a kind of freedom you can't find anywhere else. But sometimes, out there in the dead of night, on those long, deserted stretches of highway, things happen that you just can't explain. Things that make the hair on your arms stand up and your heart pound in your chest. My name's Dave, and I've been driving big rigs for over 20 years. I've seen it all, or so I thought. This story, this is the one I don't tell too often. It happened about 10 years back, on a run through the high desert of Nevada on I-80. It's a desolate place, especially after midnight. Just you, your truck, and a whole lot of nothing under a blanket of stars. I was pushing through the night, trying to make good time. The coffee was starting to wear off, and my eyes were getting heavy. Up ahead, I saw a figure on the side of the road, thumb out. Now, picking up hitchhikers is a big company policy. Safety, you name it. But this was different. It was a woman, and she looked distressed. She was wearing a thin-looking dress, not nearly warm enough for the desert night air. Something just pulled at me. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled the rig over to the shoulder. As I rolled down the window, the cold air rushed in. She walked up to the passenger door, and I could see she was shivering. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with pale skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold a deep sadness. "Can you give me a ride to the next town?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. My car broke down a few miles back. I hesitated for a second, but then I nodded and unlocked the door. She climbed in, bringing a chill with her that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. She murmured a thank you and settled into the seat, wrapping her arms around herself. I offered her my spare jacket from the sleeper cab, but she just shook her head. "I'm okay," she said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. We drove in silence for a while. I tried to make small talk, asked her where she was from, where she was headed. Her answers were short, vague. She said her name was Mary and she was just trying to get home. The strangest thing was, as we talked, the cab seemed to get colder and colder. I even checked the heater, but it was blasting on high. Still, I could see my own breath fogging in the air. The silence grew heavy again, and a weird feeling started to creep over me. A feeling of dread. I glanced over at her. She was staring straight ahead, her face completely still, almost like a porcelain doll. Not a single blink. That's when I noticed it. In the faint glow of the dashboard lights, I could see them. Her clothes. They weren't just damp, they were soaked, like she'd been caught in a downpour, but it hadn't rained out here in weeks. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Something was very, very wrong. I focused on driving, trying to rationalize it. Maybe she fell into a ditch. Maybe her car's radiator burst. But the cold, the unearthly stillness of her. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone with a living person. The sign for the next town. A little speck on the map called Winmucca. Coming to view. "This is it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can drop you at the 24-hour diner. You can get warm and call for help there." She didn't respond. I glanced over. The passenger seat was empty. Just empty. The seatbelt was still buckled. The door hadn't opened. She was just gone. I slammed on the brakes, the whole rig groaning as I screeched to a halt in the middle of the empty highway. I frantically looked around the cab, and the sleeper, everywhere. Nothing. She had vanished. I drove the rest of the way to the diner in a cold sweat, my mind racing. I stumbled inside, ordered a black coffee, and tried to process what had just happened. The waitress, an older woman with a kind face, must have seen how shaken I was. "You look like you've seen a ghost, honey," she said. I hesitated. Then I told her. I told her about the young woman, Mary, the wet clothes, the sudden disappearance. The waitress's friendly smile faded. She leaned in closer and lowered her voice. "You're not the first," she said. 10 years ago, a young woman named Mary was driving home on that stretch of road. She lost control, and her car went into the Humboldt River. They found her a few days later. Every now and then, a trucker comes in here with the same story you just told. They say she's still trying to get home. I finished my coffee, left a big tip, and got back in my truck. I didn't sleep that night. I just drove, watching the sunrise paint the desert sky. I've never driven that stretch of I-80 at night again. Some things you see on the open road, you can't unsee. And sometimes, the loneliest highways are more crowded than you think. Thanks for listening. Drive safe out there.